Hi, everybody. So, as I said 2 minutes earlier, we're going to start today and looking at Jezebel. And it's a very interesting story. Um, and let's just go to the beginning. And her name seems to be out there. In other words, she seems to have been in existence, and you can see from this Phoenician design here, you can see that um, in the hieroglyphics that you have here, this Phoenician design, you have here JZBL, the equivalent of JZBL. So I don't read this language, but anyway, but anyone who knows the language would know that this is what it is. And so this is a seal with that name. So she seems to have been out there. It's a seal that goes back to the 9th or early 8th century. And she's mentioned in a few places in the Bible. She actually, her span of considering that, her span goes pretty much over quite a few chapters. She's married to the king. All right, we'll see that right now. Her span starts from chapter 16 in the Book of Kings, the first Book of Kings, and then it goes on later to the second Book of Kings in 9, where she's killed. So the span is pretty long, and it begins with in chapter 16, verse 29, when the king, who's the son of Omri, becomes king over Israel. Now, what's really very interesting is when you look at foreign sources, I mean, it's not really relevant to us here, but it's just very interesting. And actually, Sue, you might have mentioned that last week, when you spoke a few weeks ago. The house of Omri is known in outside sources. Ahab is almost not mentioned at all. So it's very, very interesting how Ahab in the Bible becomes a very central figure. And his father, who probably was the big king and everyone knew him, is less known in our Bible. So he's more the father of Ahab as opposed to, anyway, it's very interesting. And Ahab did what was displeasing to God, all right, more than all who preceded him, right? And he's going to be constantly rebuked and considered to be a curse. And together with that, so will Jezebel. And you can see at the end of this, it's again repeated. He did more to provoke the anger of God than all the kings. So in one paragraph, it mentions this twice. And he wasn't content to follow the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who up till that point, he was the biggest curse. In other words, the dirty word was Jeroboam. Now Ahab will take over that role. And what did he do? He married Jezebel, daughter of King Et-Baal. You see the name Baal, the Phoenician god, or the god in that time, Baal of the Phoenicians. And he went and served Baal and worshipped him, right? Now, the usual assumption is that why did he worship Baal? Because he married Jezebel. However, it's not clear at this point if she's responsible for all of this. But of course, the Bible blames her for everything, as they would blame very often, will blame women for everything, right? So not only did he erect an altar, right, but he also made a sacred post. Okay, a little bit later, a few chapters later, there's a famine, and God comes to Elijah. Now, Elijah is constantly in battle with Jezebel, right? And later on, when we come to the second Book of Kings, instead of Elijah, it will be Elisha who will take over. But anyway, so Elijah, who is the prophet at the time, is told by God to go confront Ahab, and after that, he'll end the famine, and there'll be water. And so, meanwhile, Ahab had summoned Elijah, all right, to who was a God-fearing person, and told him to go through the land to all the springs of water. All right. Why, we don't know. But in the background of this is that Jezebel, and the question is Ahab going behind Jezebel's back? It's not clear. Jezebel was killing off the prophets of God. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, Elijah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them, 50 to a cave, and provided them with food and drink to all the wadis. All right. So it's possible that when he sent him off to go through the land to find some water, maybe he knew about this, or this is just by the way. Okay. This will come up. We'll see this later when we see one of the pictures. This is why I put this in. So he's protecting the prophets from Jezebel, who's killing them off, right? And then we meet up again in this book. We meet up again with Jezebel when Ahab told Jezebel what Elijah had done. What had he done? If you remember, there's a famous story where on the Carmel, where Elijah goes with the prophets of Baal, and they put a whole bunch of, they're trying to get water, right? And they bring all sorts of sacrifices and everything to the gods there. And in the end, what happens is that Elijah wins, right? And all of the over the prophets of Baal, and he kills all the prophets, right? Now these are Jezebel's prophets, right? These are her, her people. So when she hears this, that he had put all the prophets to the sword, she sends a messenger to Elijah and says, "Thus and more may the gods do, if by this time tomorrow I have not made you like one of them." Right? In other words, she says, "You're going to be killed off." So he runs away, and he comes to Beersheba, and he's and he's on his own there. And we're not that interested in Elijah. It's a very interesting story. You can read it. You have the sources here if you want to follow up on Elijah. I'm only interested in Jezebel. And now we come to 1 Kings 21. So just keep in mind, we were in Kings 16, Kings 18, Kings 19, and now we have a major story with Kings 21. And this is a very well-known story, which is about Naboth, the Jezreelite, who has a vineyard, right? And Ahab says to Naboth, "I want your vineyard, right? So I want to make it into a vegetable garden." He sees it next door. It's next door to him. And, I'll give you an even better vineyard in exchange. Or if you prefer, I'll give you the price and money. And Naboth, and here I'm going to put a word which is not in there, stupidly replied, given what happens later, right? I'm already hinting at what's going to happen for those of you who don't know the story. "God forbid that I should give up to you what I have inherited from my fathers." So he's now turning this into a theological dispute, because the nachala, the inheritance from the fathers, you can't give that up. So in other words, he's actually taking a stand with, the God-giving land. There's no way that I'm going to give it up to you. And so Ahav goes home, and he's crying, and his wife sees him, right? He lay down in his bed, he turned away his face, and his wife sees him. "Why are you so dispirited that you won't eat?" Apparently he has a good appetite, so if he's not eating, clearly something's wrong with him. And he told her, "I spoke to Naboth the Israelite and proposed to him, sell me your vineyard for money, or if you prefer, I'll give you another vineyard in exchange." But he answered, "I will not give my vineyard to you." What does he leave out, by the way?
The fact that it was inherited from his fathers.
Right. It's very convenient, isn't it? His wife said to him, "Now's the time to show yourself king over Israel. Rise and eat something and be cheerful. I'll get the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite." Okay, so she's can take things into her own hands. She writes letters. She sends them to the elders. she tells them to proclaim a fast and to seat him at the front of the assembly and testify against him, you have reviled God and the king, and then take him out and stone him to death. And that's exactly what they did. The people of the town, the elders and nobles, listened to Jezebel. All right, they did as Jezebel had instructed them, just as what was written in the letter she had sent them. They proclaimed a fast and they seated him in the front of the assembly. And then two scoundrels came, sat down opposite him, and testified against Naboth publicly as follows, okay? And then they took him outside the town. Word was sent to Jezebel, Naboth has been sent to death. By the way, this might remind you a little bit of what David does to...
Absolutely.
What David does to...
Uriah, the Hittite.
The Hittite, after he sleeps with Bathsheba, right? And he tells Uriah, come home and, she gets pregnant. And he says to Uriah, go home and sleep with your wife. Take time out. You've been in the army. You've worked hard. Go spend some time with your wife. And again, he stupidly, I put that word in stupidly again, he stupidly does not say, yeah, okay, I'll go. So what happens to him is the same thing, because he's righteous, right? And he doesn't want to take advantage of David's being kind to him. He stays with his troops, and he also ends up, there's a letter sent to Yoav, and he ends up also being killed in this way. Not the same way, but they put him near a wall where he'll be near the battlefield and where he'll be killed. Very, very interesting. Two kings. One is Ahab, and the other is David. So it's very interesting. You almost might argue that this is commentary, a form of intertextual commentary on David's actions, right? If you want to look at it that way. Okay, anyway, that's off topic, but interesting. So as soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned to death, she says to Ahab, go and take possession of the vineyard that Naboth the Jezreelite refused to sell you, but he's no longer alive. And as soon as he hears it, he doesn't ask any questions, right? He doesn't know what's happened. Ahab sets out for the vineyard of Naboth and takes possession of it. And then God, who's clearly incensed about this, tells Elijah, go down and confront the king, all right? He's now in Naboth's vineyard. He has gone there to take possession of it. And say to him, and these are very, very famous words, thus said God, would you murder and take possession? Haratzachta v'yarashta. These are very, very famous words in Hebrew. And it's come to mean all sorts of things today. Like what? It's when someone's doing something really, really evil and adding it, salt to injury, or it's basically it's like, not only did you do this immoral deed of murdering, but on top of that you're taking possession without any shame. All right, and God adds, in the very place where the dogs lapped up Naboth's blood, the dogs will lap up your blood too. Now remember, Ahab and Elijah are mortal enemies. We saw that earlier. And he says, oh, you found me, my enemy. I have. And then he goes on and he says, because you've committed yourself to doing what's evil in God's sight, I'll bring disaster upon you. I'll make a clean sweep of you, etc., etc. And your house will be, remember I told you, like Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which up till now, he was the evil person. Now you're going to be like him, like the house of Baasha, another person. Why? Because of the provocation you have caused by leading Israel to sin. Now, he hasn't led Israel to sin, right? He himself has, but they're making this into something much bigger than it was, and maybe because he's the king. And then here comes Jezebel. The dog shall devour Jezebel in the field of Jezreel. All of Ahab's line who die in the town shall be devoured by dogs, and all who die in the open country shall be devoured by the birds of the sky. Indeed, there was never anyone like Ahab who committed himself to doing what was displeasing to God. And what's here? At the instigation of his wife, Jezebel. Now, in this case, it looks like it was at her instigation, right? She can definitely be blamed for this here, but not so much in the earlier case, all right? But she is also, the two of them are now to go down and be doomed in history. Okay, so now we have here all sorts of very interesting pictures. And here we have Jezebel promising Naboth's vineyard to King Ahab. He's in bed here, right? He's in bed here. She's pointing her left finger to, she's pointing her left finger to the, she's pointing her left finger to the hat, right? And staff, right? Meaning that, why are you lying in bed? You should put on your hat and you should take your staff and act like a king, all right? He's resting on the pillow. And in the background, in the door and the window, you have several figures which are visible. So you have here, what do you see here? What's going on here?
Stoning of Naboth.
Okay, and what do you have up here?
That's harder to see.
Probably Jezebel going to the
To take possession. Yeah.
to the spy, to take to the spies. Okay. Okay. This is a 16th century woodcut. So here, I made them bigger here so you can see them. Okay. What's really funny is, how does Jezebel today? Today you call people a Jezebel, right? You can actually say to someone, "You're a Jezebel." And so what is the meaning today when we say that someone is a Jezebel?
Conniving.
Conniving, what else?
It's usually associated today with sexual promiscuity, I think. No?
Sexual promiscuity, yes, absolutely. Okay, so we have, notice here you even have a beer can called Jezebel, right? So she's a princess, she's a daughter of a Phoenician king. Her husband predeceases her. Ahab is killed in war, and she reigns as a queen for a very long time. Right?
She did a good job. She did a good job. Other than this.
Right? A good job. She's a good wife. She looks out for her husband's welfare. Right from the point of view, she cares about her husband. He's unhappy, and she takes care of him. She's also responsible for his crimes. She brings Baal worship to Israel. She kills prophets. She's Elijah's nemesis, and also the object of Elijah's hatred and curse. But you could also see her as a woman who faces her death defiantly. And at the very end, when we come to the story, which we're going to see now, she's a corpse eaten by animals. So, so just to summarize some of the things before we actually read what happens in 2 Kings 9, right? The Bible never refers to her as a queen, right? She's never called Malka. Sue, I think that Atalia was called a Malka, right?
Talia served as queen in
Served as queen, but was she called a Malka?
Her own right. In her own right.
I don't remember if the Tanakh actually.
Okay, but there she's
I think so.
reigning for 7 years. Here, she's reigning, but she's never called that. In other words, she's there. She's in his place, living in the castle, running things. But and she eventually has to be deposed because they don't like her, and God doesn't like her. Okay. There are actually some biblical allusions to her in the prophets, and we'll look at them afterwards. And however, in the Midrash, she's very, very negative. Paintings depict her in confrontation with Elijah over Baal worship. And there's paintings with the blood and gore of her eaten by dogs. And later on, towards the 19th and 20th century, there's more focus on her beauty and self-centeredness, right? And so she very often is both, and also in music, she's both a sinner but she's also a political object. And more recently, people have seen her as a sophisticated queen and see her as a more sympathetic feature. And there are also some films in 1938, 1953, and there was also a Hebrew play and an Israeli television satire about her and Elijah. Right? So in other words, today she has been rehabilitated, but in earlier times she definitely was not. So here we see a very interesting picture, which is Obadiah standing on the right. Okay. Obadiah standing on the right, bringing drinks to the prophets. Oh wait, maybe he's over here. Sorry. So this must be, this is probably Jezebel and Jezebel. Oh, that must be Jezebel. Okay, they're right. They're hunting out the prophets. They're looking for the prophets. And here you see over here, Obadiah bringing food and water and telling them, you see his mouth is telling them to be quiet. He's hiding the prophets from Jezebel. And here you can see the picture of them going out to hunt the prophets. When I couldn't resist putting this in a few years ago because if you remember, this was with those of us who are now in our 80s, not all of you, but some or more. There was a very popular song when we were growing up, whatever Lola wants, Lola.
When her done, she was great.
And little man, little Lola wants you. But anyway, when I was, for some reason, I associated Jezebel with Lola, right? Whatever she wants, I get what I aim for. Your heart and soul is what I came for, right? I'm irresistible, you fool. Give in, you'll never win, right? Give in. So that, to a certain degree, there's something about Jezebel's character that just reminded me of Lola. And so for whatever it's worth, I put it in here. This was in the Damn Yankees. And Lola was the devil's assistant. I don't remember the plot, but I do remember the song. Okay, now we come to Two Kings.
He was a baseball player.
Ah, yeah, okay.
The guy that she was after, he was a baseball player.
What did she want him to do?
She wanted him to be involved with her. I mean,
not like to throw the game or something like that.
No. Well, maybe they were going to lead to that, but today he would probably get billions of dollars, but he wasn't very smart.
Okay.
And anyway, yes, it was
right. But whatever. I don't want to spend too much time on that. It's just that I had this association, especially because people today were associating Jezebel with being a temptress. So, and the basis for her being a temptress is because Yehu is on the march to kill Jezebel. She's been running this show for a long time, and he wants to take over, and he ends up being the king. And so he marches on to Jezreel, and of course she knows what he's coming for. She knows that he's going to kill her. She's very aware of that. And when she heard of it, what did she do? She puts on her war paint. She painted her eyes with kohl and dressed her hair, and she looked out of the window. And so a lot of people who want to demonize Jezebel says she is trying to be a temptress by painting her eyes with kohl and dressing her hair. But most people, and certainly today, most feminist readers today who are not looking to demonize Jezebel, say she's going to her death, she knows this, and she's putting on a brave front, right? That's the understanding here. And she looks out of the window, and the women looking out of the window are very interesting. It's an interesting theme. We've seen this many times. Who looks out of the window?
Michal.
Michal is David's
sister's mom.
Right. And what does she see? What does she see when she looks out of the window? She sees David
dancing with the
Dancing.
Torah, with the,
Dancing.
not the Torah, with the
Dancing.
ark.
And showing off everything, and maybe who knows if he has underpants on, right? And she makes her comments about him, right? And then the other one, someone just mentioned Sisera's
Yes,
mother. She also looks out, waiting for him to come. So there's a whole tradition, and there's one man who also looks out of his window, and that's
Avimelech.
when he sees Rivka and Yitzchak fooling around. And there's also a woman looking out of the window in Mishlei, where she looks out of the window, and she's considered to be like a temptress, looking out like for trouble or customers. Okay. So she looks out and she calls out, Zimri, because Zimri also killed her husband. He killed her husband. He killed a whole bunch of people. He killed her family and whatever. And she's the only one who's stopping him from in his killing spree. Is all well, Zimri, murderer of your master? He looked up toward the window and said, who's on my side? Who? And 2 or 3 eunuchs leaned out toward him, right? Presumably they're on his side. Throw her down, he said. They threw her down, and her blood spattered on the wall and on the horses, and they trampled her. It also could be possibly he trampled her. It's not clear. By Yir Masena, it's not clear if it's he or they. Then he went inside and ate and drank, and he said, look to this cursed thing, ha'arura hazot, right? He's thinking her, right? She's no longer anything worthy of, right? And bury her, for she was a king's daughter. So after he bothers to eat and drink, all of a sudden he remembers that, maybe we should bury her, because after all, she is a king's daughter. Not that she was a ruling queen, right? Or a king's husband, a queen's wife, but a king's daughter, right? From up north. So they went to bury her, but all they found of her was the skull, the feet, and the hands, just like the curse, right? They came and reported to him, and he said, it's just as the Lord spoke to his servant Elijah the Tishbite. The dogs shall devour the flesh of Jezebel in the field of Jezreel, and the carcass of Jezreel shall be like dung. Niflat Jezebel Kedomen. By the way, I wrote a whole paper on this phrase, and you could look it up on my website. I'm not going to talk about it here, but the fact is that she's like dung on the ground in the field of Jezreel. So no one will be able to say this was Jezebel. In other words, we are going to wipe her out, her memory completely. She will be like dung. No one will be able to say where she was buried or anything like that. And there are lots and lots and lots of pictures of Jezebel. Here's one that's less bloody, right? This is from the Book of Illustrations, 17th century. And you can see here on the bottom, right, they're throwing her out. The 3 eunuchs are throwing her out. And here you can see the horses trampling her. And then you can see the dogs coming to eat her. And here you have the hands and the feet and the head. That's all that's left of her. We'll come to an interesting midrash based on that. And here's another picture. This is an embroidery. This is an embroidery. Would you expect to see this on an embroidery, right? But look at the background, though. This very, right, on the surface, right? You have all sorts of animals and everything, right? You have but what do you have up here in the far right? The far right, again, the
Her
same
hands
thing,
and legs.
right? And then at the bottom, the dogs, and then here, the head and the hands and the legs, all right? So you have your, okay. By the way, someone who's written a lot about this is Janet Gaines. She wrote a book and also an article, and she basically has rehabilitated, Jezebel. So you have the first responders, which is intra-biblical commentary, and you find them in other words, what the deed that was done. It's like those of you who followed this week's parasha and last week's parasha, when of course I wrote about it in my blog, when Pinchas kills the fornicating couple with his spear, and then is rewarded with the Peace Prize, right?
Yeah.
So you have something similar going on here, where Yehu, who really is a horrible, disgusting creature, he's violent, and he's killing everyone off, and people wonder about him. Does he deserve to become the king afterwards? Does he deserve to have Eliyahu and afterwards Elisha on his side? So in Hosea, right? In Hosea, when Hosea is told to marry, and we've talked, I think we discussed Hosea this year, maybe not, I don't remember. And when he's told to marry a prostitute, God tells Hosea to marry the son Jezreel. Why? For I will soon punish Ufakadati, I will remember the house of Yehu for the bloody deeds of Jezreel, and put an end, Vishpati, to the monarchy of the house of Israel. So you have a hint in Hosea of disapproval, right? Disapproval of what Yehu did, okay? And then you have Hubbard, who, in a quotation from Yvonne Sherwood, the prostitute and the prophet, she wrote a very important book about Hosea. She writes, it was always obvious that Yehu and his descendants had overplayed their hand, and in their ambition, how outstripped any sense of divine commission, right? And another pair, Anderson and Friedman, in their book on Hosea viewed the behavior of Yehu in a dual light. In the very act of carrying out the divine judgment against the house of Ahab, he overstepped the bounds of his mandate and showed that arrogance and self-righteousness that was the undoing of the previous dynasty. So in other words, we are not meant to look favorably on Yehu's act. Okay. And then you have some other things here, which I don't want to go into. If you're interested, I have in my book, it's called Metaphors Connecting Jeremiah and Jezebel, the Case of Doman. And it's in my book. You can find it there. Okay. And then there's also something very interesting. Janet Gaines, who I mentioned before, looks at this Septuagint and adds to the glory of Isabel. Isabel. Okay. By the way, Isabel is Jezebel, just so you know, right? Isabel then becomes Isabel.
I never knew that.
But no one calls their child today Jezebel. But Isabel is a very, a lot of people are called Isabel. So the Hebrew is Vatishlach Isabel Malach El Eliyahu Memor. And Jezebel said to Elihu, this is in the Septuagint, and said, and then the Hebrew goes on, Ko Yasun Elohim Ko Yosifu, God did so to me and more also. If I do not make thy life tomorrow as the life according to them. We read that earlier. But the Septuagint inserts this. And Jezebel said to Eliyahu and said, if thou art Eliyahu and I am Jezebel, God do so to me and more also. Okay? In other words, Janet Gaines argues that Jezebel is on it in the Septuagint, is on an equal footing with Elijah. And very interesting, was this in the original text and taken out? Or was it put in by the, and we have no way of knowing, right? We have no way of knowing. But it's tempting to think that it was in the original text, and that for various reasons, the redactors of the Bible took it out. And then, of course, you have the second responders, who's the Midrash, right? So you have that whoever relates slander, whoever accepts slander, whoever gives false testimony deserves to be cast to the dogs, all right? And there's a quotation from Exodus here. So you have here this idea of justification, right? The justification for what was done to Jezebel, because she slandered, right? She slandered. She got false witnesses against Naboth. And then in Eliyahu Rabbah, of course, it's clearly she's blamed, right? Who caused Ahab to lose his place both in the world and the next, together with his sons. It was Jezebel, his wife, who taught him pagan practice. Now, it does not say that in the Bible. Let's just quickly, very quickly go back to what we saw at the beginning, the very, very, very beginning. It does not say that. He took his wife. He went and served Baal and worshipped him. He erected an altar, right? He made a sacred post, right? It's here in the opening, it says absolutely nothing about her being responsible. But of course, the Midrash can't let that one lie. And so they have to make it clear that she's responsible. There's one place in the Bible, and not in the Bible, in the Midrash, in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer 17, that talks positively about Jezebel. And it's a very funny Midrash. Right? Remember, what's left of her? Her feet, her hands, and her head. Sue, you want to read this?
Sure. Despite their negative description of Jezebel, the rabbis did not refrain from enumerating her merits when she was worthy of praise. Where do we learn about acts of kindness towards mourners? From Jezebel, whose home was close to the marketplace, and whenever a funeral procession passed by, she would come forth from her house, strike with her hands, lament with her mouth, and walk 10 paces.
Okay, so what does she do? She uses her mouth, that's her head. Yep. She claps her hands, and she walks with her feet.
And when a bridegroom passed through the marketplace, she would come out, clap her hands, call out with her mouth, and walk 10 steps after him. When Elijah of blessed memory prophesied that the dog shall devour Jezebel in the field of Jezreel, the prophecy was only partially fulfilled. For when her body is eaten by the dogs, they leave her feet and hands, because these limbs performed acts of kindness.
So this is this is very ironic, but this is the closest we come to saying something positive about Jezebel, that she was enthusiastic and a participator in funerals and weddings, right? On the other hand, I don't think that's the purpose of the rabbis. I don't think the rabbis' purpose is to show that she was a great person. What do they really want to show here? They want to teach about acts of kindness, right? So so even the evil Jezebel, right? Even the evil Jezebel was capable of acts of kindness, right? But okay, anyway, I love this particular midrash. It's one of my favorites. Okay, and then the fourth responder is in the New Testament, here is where you sort of get the idea of her being a temptress, because it says here, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacred, sacrificed unto idols. All right. And I gave her space to repent of her fornication. She repented not. I will cast her into a bed and commit, and them that commit adultery with her into great tribulation, and I will kill her children. So this appears in Revelation, and you have here a very interesting picture based on Revelation, right? The fall and rise of Jezebel based on Revelation, right? And here you have Jezebel in the middle here. And so this is where you have the idea of her being a temptress, besides besides what I pointed out to you earlier with that phrase of her putting on mascara and really very interesting, right?
Mm. This was done by a man.
Right, this is really, really cool. You see the fire here, the hellfires. I mean, it is the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
Here's another one, also Revelation. This is more modern in terms, but this is also Jezebel, and based on Revelation 2:20, what we just looked at. Right? And okay, so now we have certain types of pictures, which early paintings of her depicts the blood and gore, right? And so you have certain examples of, I just have this as a summary, I'll show each one here. So some depict the blood and gore of her being eaten by dogs. Some depict her and Ahab in confrontation with Elijah. And some even have her giving advice to Ahab. So you have all of these types of things going on here. So the first one is the blood and gore. And this is very bloody and very gory, right? And so here she's being torn apart by 2 dogs and trampled by 2 horses. Here you can see she has the crown on her head still. Here's another one where, I mean, this one is much more, this is pretty, anyway, here's another one here. You can see more or less in the foreground, right? You can see the dogs. You don't have that deal of a picture. Okay. Presumably, this is Jehu, who now has the crown on his head. And here's the death of Jezebel, right? This is story, and you can see down here, right?
I'm very hungry.
Right, you can see the dogs are waiting, right? The horses are there, and the dogs are waiting. And this looks like a typical Doré picture, right? Of her being pushed over the wall. Now here you have Jezebel and Ahab being met by Elijah, where he says to them, "Hast thou killed and also taken possession?" And here we have another, it's a very famous one. This is from, I'll show it to you in color, but this is from a wood engraving, right? And now I'm going to show it to you in color because it's in color, but really very, notice how she's dressed here, even here, the white, how she stands out. And here, this is it's a print, but it has color in here. Same idea. And here, this is the
Elijah on the right.
Yeah, Elijah's on the right.
John the Baptist. He looks.
Yeah, he does. Right. But this is the same picture. This is Elijah over here. The same picture. Right. And again, she's wearing white and dressed, with the queen. And here, this is when he's again saying, "You killed and inherited." And here, this is a different rendition of her. Notice how she looks like a temptress here, right? Compared to the earlier picture that we saw when he was in bed, right? Where she looks like
a witch.
Right, she looks like a witch. That picture. Yeah. Compare it with this picture, right?
Looks like his grandmother.
Right, we could become a long way, right? Come a long way from that to this, where he's lying in bed and she's, so here, giving him advice, right? Sorry, I didn't have to do what I did there, but it was more, I am showing you the contrast, okay? And here you have here, having her focus on her beauty in the 19th and 20th century, right? So, and maybe based on the verse, she painted her eyes with gold and dressed her hair, right? Looked out of the window. Or or maybe also because of what we saw in Revelation. Okay, and now we see some interesting paintings of, they're really contemporary, right? These are really contemporary. People have really shown an interest in her character. And here's another interesting one. And here's Milo Shore, who's an Israeli artist. He's showing a picture here with the, here you see the dogs here. Dogs here. And here you have the vineyard, right? The grapes. And here she's the lady in red. Here's her crown. And it says here, this was the story about Navoth, Israeli Navoth's vineyard. So this is really very interesting. And is this possibly a bed here and a head? What do you think this is here?
A knife, maybe.
You think it's a knife?
I would
Okay.
say it looks like a head and someone's resting it on an arm, but
Yeah, it looks like that, but it's hard to tell. Anyway, very, very
But
interesting.
you need a knife to cut the grapes.
Right. Anyway, very, very interesting. And here, this is
This is
a painting by Rafi Talbi. Right. And here we have another one of Jezebel. Very, very interesting ones, right? And this is Yolanta Shiloni. The description says, who's seen Jezebel? She was born to be the woman we can blame. Interesting. Okay. And so we have a woman, in sort of in the hijab in the back. And here we have a woman who looks like a breast or, anyway, very, very interesting. Okay. In modern literature, there's a lot of poetry, a lot of books, a lot of novels, even an online magazine. So in time, we have time for the poets, for sure. So in rhythmic poetry, F.R. Higgins wrote a song for the Clatterbones, right? Which was an evocation of the biblical tale of Jehu and his lover Jezebel, right? He got the idea for the poem from hearing a street singer, Harefoot Mike, who claimed he could bring the ghost of Jezebel back with a clap of his clapperbones. And so it's called the Clatterbones. Clatterbones are bones or slate used similarly to castanets, right?
wait,
So
is that a typo, or is it in the play, is it really Yehu who's with Jezebel and not Ahab?
we're going to see the poem in a minute, right?
Okay.
This is Higgins, but he's a contemporary of Yeats, yes, sure, right? In fact, you can see the editors of the broadside are Yeats and Higgins, right? And there was like musical editor, and it was actually to music. And I actually have the music here. If you want to stay on later and remind me, we can listen to it. But the words are really a little disturbing today, because obviously. Norman, you want to read it with full Irish, whatever.
Who, me?
You, yeah.
God rest that Jewy woman, Queen Jezebel, the bitch who peeled the clothes from her shoulder bones down to her spent teats as she stretched out of the window among the geraniums, where she chaffed and laughed like one half daft, titivating her painted hair. King Jehu he drove to her. She tipped him a fancy beck, but he from his knacky sidecar spoke, who'll break that dewlapped neck? And so she was thrown from the window, like Lucifer she fell, beneath the feet of the horses, and they beat the light out of Jezebel. That corpse wasn't planted in clover. Nothing of her was found, save those gray bones that Harefoot Mike gave me for their lovely sound. And as once her dancing body made starlit princes sweat, so I'll just clack, though her ghost lack a back, There's music in the old bones yet.
Okay, so this is an amazing poem, right? It's an amazing poem, and I at the time I looked for it, you know, and I found it. I didn't find too much about this, but I did find maybe today if I would use artificial intelligence, I could find more. But at the time when I was writing my paper, I couldn't find that much. And so it says here, the song for the Clatterbones is a simultaneously bitter and whimsical equation of the Old Testament figure of Queen Jezebel with Ireland itself.
That was obvious.
That was obvious. Okay. Why do you say that?
I mean, but the problem with us is that we don't know the history of other places
Right.
as well as we should. And
Right.
Irish are, I mean, if anybody plowed through, what is that?
James Joyce.
Yeah, I mean, you would understand a little bit, but no, we don't know enough about.
Right, right. But anyway, I thought this was really very interesting. So, you know, it's a sort of thing.
We need to know because we don't even know how they use some of these words.
Right, right, right. But clearly, I mean, what's offensive, of course, is the beginning. The Jewy woman, right? That's very offensive. On the other hand, she's Jewish, but isn't that interesting? He considers her to be Jewish. The Bible would not like to consider her Jewish. They would like to consider her to be Phoenician, right? And
she's not
so
considered by us to be Jewish.
what?
Maybe that's why they didn't really want to call her queen because they didn't consider her Jewish.
Right. Well, we don't know. Okay, we really don't know. Okay. Anyway, you have here another poem which was written 7 years after Higgins. It was written in Hebrew, and it was called, one second, it was called Jezebel in Hebrew, by Shulamit Kalugai, right, who found split between Jezebel's mask, finding a deep sense of loss and vulnerability as she adopted the voice of the queen in these last hours of her life. This comes from Leslie Hazelton's book, she wrote about Jezebel. And so I don't know if you could read it clearly or not. Marsha, you want to read it? The English, not the Hebrew.
Okay. The days of my life pass by, dissolve like mist. I don't know the what and when. I don't know the who. Baal and Astarte have grown alien to me. My kingdom and my foes grow alien too. I don't expect the arrival of anyone, for who would come to me in my time of drought? No one is coming here, not even a crow from the river Crit with a greeting in his mouth. Everything is dream. The islands of Tyre, Baal's court, my self-enclosure inside Samaria's walls. A dream, my prophets. A dream, the prophets of God, whom wild, rebellious, stiff-necked, nothing appalls. All is vanity, the pillars of smoke and dream, sons, brothers, sovereignty and love, all things. Ahab's life and death, the life of Jezebel, the queen of Samaria, proud daughter of kings. And as the summer night approaches dawn, so does the dream, my life, approach its close. And Baal and Astarte grow far and dim, as does Samaria, as do my foes. Silent the summer night, dark as the grave. A few stars shine, clouds wander in the air, a watchman's call, the rustle of olive leaves, a dog's short bark, dogs barking everywhere.
So this was written in 1941. So it's very interesting what she might have had in her mind. I mean, we're not reading the Hebrew, so it's a problem to analyze a poem in English, but it's very interesting, you know, what she had in mind. She was born in 1891, so she would have been about 50 when this poem was written. I think it's very interesting. And also in contrast to the poem, the misogynist poem that we saw earlier, I think it's important to read a woman's poem as well. So you have also lots and lots of books, All right.
Right.
Just see them all here, right? And interesting. And then you have Leslie Hazelton's novel, which you might try to. I took it out. I actually read it. I thought it's very readable, and so you might want to read that. It's a revisionist account presenting Jezebel as a sophisticated queen engaged in mortal combat with the fundamentalist prophets Elijah. All right, so you can see why I would like the book. So okay, and then you also have Janet Gaines's book, which is called "Music in the Old Bones," right? Jezebel through the ages, and so she, in a review of her book, I love this. She Gaines is at her best, fleshing out Jezebel's story. Arriving in her adopted homeland, she felt like something of a missionary, right? Okay, so Jezebel was a missionary. Elijah, by contrast, has all the tireless, unrelenting fervor of a jingoist. You know what a jingoist is? Today we don't use that word anymore. No one really hears that word anymore. But what is a jingoist?
No, it's someone who wrote in the Yellow Press. It was very pro nationalist
Manga.
writing.
Right. So thank you. So somebody who's really a nationalist, even like over the top. Okay. So anyway, so she attempts to soften the moral case against Jezebel, explaining interpretive possibilities that reflect more positively of her. So this is actually, there's also an article by her if you can't get a hold of the book. And then I'll end with this because we're running out of time. It no longer exists, unfortunately, but Jezebel was the name of a online magazine. Did any of you know that? Okay, it stopped at a certain point, but you could probably still find it because anything that was online never goes out, and it was launched in 2007. And the fact is that they decided to choose the name Jezebel for their online feminist magazine, right? So I thought that was very, very interesting. And I used to read it when it first came out, and then it got to, it moved in a different direction. So, but you could just see on July 4th last year, I think I went out, pretty much last year it went out. So I think I taught this last year on July 4th for some reason, because I have it here. Anyway.
Naomi,
Yeah?
it seems to be back online.
Oh, really? Oh, that's good. Okay, so you can all look for it. Thank you. Good. Okay. It went out and now it's back. Okay. And now you have here, okay, we're not going to have time for this. You have somebody who wrote about, no, it's 7 o'clock already, but you have here someone who actually writes a description, right, of what's happening to her. And so just to give you a sense of the tone here, as Jezebel lay dying, her soul reached out to the mind of her destroyer, but it was not available to her entreaty. It was busy, rolling with hurt and outrage, adrift in its streams of vengeance, mired in vitriol, burning with loathing and strong, still stinging, humiliated and exposed in his falsity. The usurper railed against the confidence, the authority, the success of the mother who had made all her children safe, provided peace, comfort, and security, and who feared naught. So just to give you a sense, it's very short. And then just to end with this, there is music. There's a lot of music, finding themselves based on Jezebel, including Hebrew, including a Golden Gate Quartet in 1934, which has a Jezebel style song. I could, if you want to stay on later, I could show them to you, and you could see some of the words here, But of course, they're very anti-Jezebel, right? 9 days she lay in Jerusalem streets. Her flesh was too filthy for the dogs to eat. Just to give you a sense of the, and then you have a group, Australian rock sign, and then you also have their stuff, and then you also have the Israeli composer who has a song as well. And here's the I actually translated into English. And movies, Betty Davis, Paulette Goddard, a modern drama here. There was a satire in Israeli television based on a play, and also, of course, the Yehudim Ba'im, which I've shown you occasionally, are satirizing her. So you have here the okay. And this is the it was called Lunch. It was called Lunch, the Israeli. And here you have somebody killing Jezebel here. This is a modern depiction killing Jezebel. And here's the picture of from the Jews are coming, where Eliyahu is seen as, here's Eliyahu together with Elijah, and he's actually seen, because he did mouth to mouth to somebody, he's seen actually as a possible child molester. Okay, so this is just to give you a sense of all the things that you have here. Okay, so we had a lot of stuff here. If anyone wants to stay on afterwards to look at some of the stuff, we can, but we don't have to. So what are your thoughts about all of this?
Well, it's interesting that the grapevine is more important than the human female person. She's acquitted to something that could be replaced much more easily than she could.
I think it's interesting that over time she became less evil, less, she became more, people became more compassionate toward her.
Well, I think that's very recent.
Yeah. But I think Nabot was an older man, from what I vaguely remember reading this story. She was Abigail. She was younger, and they could have waited a couple of years. He would have died. They could have gotten.
No. You're mixing that up with Naval.
Oh, no, right, yeah. But I mean, the king has a right to take all the property. That's right. Not unusual in history.
And that's why I said what I did. I mean, when I put the word stupidly, right? If history would have been different, right?
Later on, and he could have come out ahead. Yeah, so he was lit.
Nabot could have said, okay,
but I have to honor my sainted mother. That's the Irish in that, and so I can't give it to you today. You can have it next week, maybe, it's kind of stalled.
Right, Sue, a new idea for a midrash, right? In other words, right now, I don't know if I've told you, but I'm working on a book with my co-author. My co-author is AI. And I put together a book, an alternative reading of the book of Genesis. This was my rabbi suggested that I do this to keep my mind off of stuff. And so, anyways, I've already put the book together. And the first draft was I did 1 week, and then the second, and now I'm editing it. And I'll eventually put it online with no hiding the fact that I'm writing it with AI. I mean, I'm not hiding that at all. So, what if? So it's a whole bunch of what ifs. So right now I'm only looking at Genesis, but what if Navot, right, had agreed? Or what if Uriah had agreed?
Right.
Right?
Well, so, he didn't really have maybe he knew psychologically that he wasn't going to come back to his wife, but
No, if he would have come back to his wife, then
he would have lived.
Yes,
they could have hid the pregnancy. They could have pretended that he was the one who did it.
That's
Right.
happened a lot, you know, over the
Right,
centuries.
right.
Well, I'm working on getting a drone for our neighborhood.
Drone?
Well, we don't have enough policemen. We had a meeting of the neighborhood, and there's been a lot of robbery, and I learned something. I mean, do you know that these crooks are so sophisticated that they have a button in their car that when you identify it was a white Chevrolet or whatever the names of these cars are these days, and the license plate was X, the thieves have already pressed this button and changed their license plate.
Yeah.
Technology. Yeah. So Beverly Hills, which is a lot richer than our neighborhood, has a drone. And I'm looking into the fact that if everybody chips in, we could have a drone too. We only have
They're asking people though not to, like, with the fires and everything, they're saying that you don't be flying your drones. They're interfering with emergency response. I read that somewhere.
it's not bad. I mean, we're not up to that yet. I mean,
Okay.
Beverly
Good
Hills
luck.
drone is functioning, but I mean, I never thought in a million billion years that I would be, because everybody thinks it's a good idea because there's only 6 policemen in the whole area.
Actually, you were being recorded, but does anyone else have any other idea? I just realized that. Any ideas related to, before I turn off the recording,
Yeah.
to what we were looking at today? No? Okay, so I gave Marcia the last word here.
Sorry.
Thank you, Naomi. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
So I'm going to stop, and if anyone wants to stay on, they can. 1 second, let me just stop the recording.